Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. This episode of Anti-War News is sponsored by Devolution Machine, which is an anti-war combat veteran-owned and operated precision machine shop that operates with those values in mind. Devolution Machine offers CNC turning and milling along with manual surface and cylindrical grinding services to support any non-defense related customer. Devolution Machine can manufacture in quantities of 1 to 1 million in materials ranging from hardened tool steel to soft plastics. Devolution Machine's location in central Pennsylvania has not limited its ability to serve customers from their city of Williamsport to California to Florida. If you or someone you know is looking for manufacturing services in the United States from a values-based company, please reach out to Andrew at info@devolution-machine.com. And that is spelled Devolution. You could find that email in the description. Or look for them on their Instagram at Devolution Machine to keep an eye out for coming expansions and products. All right, so another reminder that we are fundraising at antiwar.com, and the exciting news is that we've already secured $50,000 in matching funds. We're trying to get up to $100,000 for this fundraiser, and this is money that goes directly to funding the website, day-to-day operations, essentially paying the bills. And we are a nonprofit, so everything is tax deductible. So if you have the means and you appreciate what we do at antiwar.com, please go to antiwar.com/donate, and you could see the different ways that you could help us out. All right, so to get into the news here, the U.S. military bombs a boat off the coast of Venezuela. So President Trump claimed in a post on Truth Social that a U.S. military strike on a boat near Venezuela targeted Tren de Aragua, or TDA, a Venezuelan gang that the Trump administration recently designated as a terrorist organization. The post came after Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the U.S. conducted a strike against a boat that had departed Venezuela. Trump said, quote, "Earlier this morning, on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility," end quote. Trump posted a video of the strike and claimed that it killed 12 people, which he called terrorists, but there's no evidence presented to back up these claims. They're claiming that the boat was carrying drugs. From the video that Trump released, it looks like a small boat. I mean, it looks like there's outboard motors on the back. I count about 4 what look like outboard motors. It's too blurry to tell how many people were on, but essentially the video is this boat moving along in the water, and then there's an explosion. So this is presumably the airstrike. And again, this is really, I think they're setting a precedent here. This is, they're doing this in the name of combating cartels. Of course, this is also part of the push toward a regime change effort in Venezuela. We'll get more into that. But this is, we've seen threats and talk from Republicans for years about actually taking military action, using the U.S. military against cartels. And this is appears to be the first time that they're doing that. No legal justification here, no authorization from Congress or anything like that. And I mean, even if the allegation is true, let's say, they suspect, how can they know for sure that there's drugs on the boat? And even if they did, you got an armada out there of Navy vessels. Why couldn't you intercept the boat? You just blew it up. No trial or anything, just executing people for allegedly carrying drugs. And I know in a lot of cases, boats that are smuggling drugs, there could be crew members who don't know, who are unaware of the fact that they are involved in moving drugs. But the U.S. military just blew this boat out of the water. So anyway, Trump went on. He said, quote, "No U.S. forces were harmed in this strike. Please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America," end quote. The president also claimed that TDA, the gang, is operating under the control of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, but that contradicts a recently declassified U.S. intelligence memo that said it was unlikely that Maduro's government cooperates with or directs TDA. So the memo from the Office of the Director of Intelligence, dated April 7th, 2025, said that some members of the Venezuelan government may tolerate or cooperate with TDA, but Maduro and his top officials do not and view, or probably do not, and view the group as a threat. The memo states, quote, "The Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the United States," end quote. And the activity of this gang in the U.S., that started after the migrant crisis, after the first regime change effort in the first Trump administration, when they imposed what essentially amounted to an economic blockade on Venezuela, backed Juan Guaido, backed a failed coup against him, and that caused the migrant crisis, exacerbated one from Venezuela. And that's when you started seeing this gang operating in other countries. So Trump said that the strike hit the boat while it was operating in international waters. He also claimed that the boat was carrying drugs and heading to the U.S., and that contradicts claims from Rubio, who told reporters earlier in the day that the boat was likely headed toward Trinidad or some other Caribbean country. So the detail, everything's a little fuzzy here, and there's a lot of lies being told about this whole deployment around sending these 8 U.S. warships and at least one nuclear-powered attack submarine toward Venezuela in the name of combating cartels. We're being told a lot of lies. And one of them is this so-called Cartel of the Suns. So Representative Carlos Jimenez, who's a Republican from Florida, Cuban-born, and this is a big driver behind this, is people that were either born in Cuba or they're first generation born in the U.S., born in Florida, their family were exiles of Cuba after the Castro took over. A lot of them really agitate for sanctions on Cuba, sanctions on Venezuela, and they want the U.S. government to try to do regime changes in these countries. And this is a big driving force. They have a lot of political influence in the U.S. And this is Jimenez, this Republican, he's tweeting in Spanish these things, and he claimed that the U.S. sank a boat belonging to the Cartel of the Suns, which is not a real organization. That is a term used to describe an alleged network of Venezuelan government and military officials who are allegedly involved in drug trafficking. It doesn't actually exist as an organization, but the U.S. has declared them a terrorist group and declared that Maduro's their leader. So, of course, the implication here is if they're taking military action against the cartels, they could take military action against Maduro. So far, there's been no comments from the Venezuelan government that I've seen, at least, about this strike on this boat. I'm sure they're going to say something on Wednesday. We'll see if they downplay it or what. But Maduro has been warning that if the U.S. attacks Venezuela, he's ready to fight. He's going to declare a republic in arms. So we're treading in very dangerous waters here. And of course, I covered yesterday that Axios report that said Rubio is largely driving this policy, and Rubio is incredibly hawkish again on Venezuela and Cuba. And back in 2019, during the first regime change effort, when he was a senator, he posted a picture of Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya. It was like a before and after, and the before was just a regular picture of him, and the after was from the photo of when he was killed in that very brutal way on the side of the road in Libya after a U.S. NATO airstrike hit his convoy, and then he was essentially tortured to death in just a horrific way. And Rubio posted that picture, as a threat against Maduro. And that's who's the Secretary of State now, and that's who's driving this policy. And again, they're really misrepresenting things, lying to us about this so-called Cartel of the Suns. There's a think tank, it's called, I believe, Insight Crimes, and they actually receive funding from the U.S. government. And they study organized crime in the Americas, and they're very critical of the Venezuelan government. But they had a whole thing, and they've been critical of this idea saying essentially that these U.S. terrorist designations of the Cartel of the Suns misrepresent what it actually is. They also deny that this so-called cartel, they deny the Venezuelan government links to the Tren de Aragua gang. They even said there's not much evidence that they're even much of involved in drug trafficking. Yet we see this airstrike on a boat claiming that it's Tren de Aragua carrying drugs. There's just no reason to believe what our government is telling us about this, about these people that they just blew out of the water. And we'll see if things become clearer. Right now, we just really don't know, and we'll see if there's any push in Congress to try to rein this stuff in. It's just a bad precedent has been set here, and who knows what the next step is. All right, so the next one here, Marines conduct war games in Puerto Rico amid Venezuela tensions. So this article is from Kyle Anselin at the Libertarian Institute. So 4,000 Marines are conducting war games in Puerto Rico amid a U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean Sea aimed at Venezuela. On Sunday, thousands of Marines with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit deployed to Puerto Rico to conduct drills. They're joined by an amphibious assault ship. And so, U.S. drills in Puerto Rico, before we might not have really thought much of them, but with all these tensions, Puerto Rico is not that far from Venezuela. So this is something, really this region we should be keeping an eye on now, a closer eye on than before. All right, so the next one here, Trump says that the U.S. bombed Iran for Israel. So President Trump, I actually like my longer headline. It says, Trump says he's done a lot for Israel, including bombing Iran. So President Trump said in an interview published on Tuesday that no one has done more for the state of Israel than himself, and cited his recent airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities as an example. He said, quote, "So Israel is amazing because, I have good support from Israel. Look, nobody has done more for Israel than I have, including the recent attacks with Iran, wiping that thing out. We, that plane, wiped them out like nobody ever saw before," end quote. So essentially saying, that he did bomb Iran for Israel. There's really no arguing against that case. I saw Dan McAdams and Ron Paul in the Liberty Report. They did really good coverage of this interview with the Daily Caller. He was kind of really all over the place. And another thing that he said was, so it's funny. So he's asked about the growing skepticism about the U.S.-Israel relationship among young Republicans. And essentially his response is, the Israel lobby used to have complete control of Congress. You couldn't criticize them at all. It would be political suicide. And now they're losing that control. It's just funny with Trump, he, instead of saying, people don't understand this special relationship, the Israel's our greatest ally for this reason, he's saying instead, they used to completely control Congress and now not so much anymore. He actually says the lobby, the lobby is the strongest that there was. So he's not saying, giving the usual justification for U.S. support for Israel. He's saying, well, the lobby might be losing some of its power, which is funny. And it's not as much as he's saying. He's making it seem like, in some comments, because he said something similar during the campaign in 2024. He said now that, basically Israel used to have complete control of Congress, the lobby, and you could lose you would lose your political career if you criticize them. And he said now it's the opposite. You have AOC and all these lunatics saying all this stuff. It's not the opposite. It's still a very small number, but it's certainly growing. And it's going to be a problem for Israel and the lobby in the coming years. And let's see, what else did he say? He also said, basically Israel's campaign in Gaza is bad for their public image. He said, quote, "They may be winning the war, but they're not winning the world of public relations, and it's hurting them. But Israel was the strongest lobby 15 years ago that there has ever been, and now it's been hurt, especially in Congress," end quote. So again, it's just the way he says things sometimes is really revealing. This is the U.S. president saying they're the strongest lobby. You used to not be able to criticize them at all, and now you can. And he is saying it in the transcript. You can't really tell, because they didn't release the video or the recording. But I remember in one interview in 2024 with Sean Hannity, he said the same thing. He was like, lamenting it, basically making it sound like it's a bad thing now that the Israel lobby doesn't have complete control over the Congress. All right, so the next one here, Iran says there's a path for negotiations with the U.S., saying that it's not closed. This is another one from Kyle. So a top Iranian official said that a deal with the U.S. is still possible, but Washington must drop its demands to limit Tehran's missile program. Talks between the U.S. and Iran broke off in June when Israel launched a unprovoked war against the Islamic Republic. On Tuesday, Ali Larijani posted a statement from the Iranian Supreme National Security Council on X. It said, quote, "The path for negotiations with the U.S. is not closed, yet these are the Americans who only pay lip service to talks and do not come to the table, and they wrongfully blame Iran for it. We indeed pursue rational negotiations. By raising unrealizable issues such as missile restrictions, they set a path which negates any talks," end quote. So I forgot, I've been so focused on the demand for Iran, the zero enrichment demand from the U.S., that this is another demand, is that they must limit their ballistic missile program, which, I mean, after that war, how can they possibly expect Iran to do anything like that? After that, surprise attack by Israel, backed by the U.S., and the U.S. airstrikes and everything. It's just another completely unrealistic demand that will only serve to make sure peace talks don't happen. All right, so the next one here, IDF and Starvation kill 89 Palestinians in Gaza. So to get into the violence in Gaza, there's a really horrific picture in here. So Gaza's health ministry said on Tuesday that Israeli forces killed 76 Palestinians and wounded 281 over the previous 24-hour period as relentless U.S.-backed Israeli attacks continued across the Strip. On top of the violent deaths, the health ministry said that it recorded another 13 starvation deaths, including 3 children, due to the Israeli siege, and famine is occurring in at least in the Gaza government, likely in other areas, but that's been officially confirmed by the UN Hunger Monitor and also a U.S.-backed Hunger Monitor as well. So Israeli strikes on Tuesday included the bombing of Palestinians waiting for water in the Al-Mawasi area of southern Gaza. According to Mahmoud Basel, a spokesman for Gaza's civil defense, 5 children were killed in the strike. And this picture shows 4 of those 5 children who were killed at the Nasser hospital. And I mean, these are very young children, just another massacre of kids. And it wasn't the only one that happened in Gaza on Tuesday. So Basel wrote on Telegram, quote, "They were standing in line to fill up water in the Al-Mawasi area, which had been described as safe, when the occupation forces directly targeted them, turning their search for life into a new massacre," end quote. Later reports said that a total of 21 people, including 7 children, were killed while waiting for water. And so this massacre of children in Al-Mawasi comes as the Israeli military is ordering Palestinian civilians in Gaza City to flee to the area. And the Arabic language spokesman for the IDF actually said in a post on Tuesday, the same day that they bombed people waiting for water there, to go to Al-Mawasi. And I mean, I have to believe this is intentional, that this is all psychological warfare. I mean, it's just they've continued. They have not let up the bombing of South Gaza when they're saying, telling the Palestinians in Gaza City to go to the south. It's almost like they want them to stay there and starve and die in Gaza City. So anyway, medical sources told Al Jazeera that at least 42 people were killed by Israeli attacks on Gaza City. So they've continued the heavy attacks on Gaza City as they're attempting to take it over, to completely conquer it and destroy it. All right, so the next one here, IDF chief says Gaza City offensive is underway. So IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir said on Tuesday that the offensive to conquer Gaza City is underway as tens of thousands of Israeli reservists began to report for duty to take part in the major escalation of Israel's genocidal war. So Zamir said, quote, "We are going to increase and enhance the strikes of our operation, and that is why we called you. We have already begun the ground operation in Gaza City," end quote. So he was addressing reservists who had just been called up. Zamir also vowed that the war would continue until Hamas is totally defeated. And this is despite, we see all these reports that behind the scenes, he's telling Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire deal, saying that there's going to be too many Israeli casualties, that they could kill the the captives in Gaza. But publicly, he's very much, in support of all this. Haaretz reported that about 350 Israeli reservists signed a statement that said they opposed the Israeli government's decision to take over Gaza City and that they would not report for duty. Relatively, they're calling up about 60,000 people. 350 is a relatively small number of that group. But they're going forward with this despite the fact, the famine, there's just going to be so many civilian casualties as they continue to escalate this thing, and all supported by the U.S. All right, so the next one here, IDF commander did not boost security after visiting Nova on October 7th. So this article is from Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, about something that happened on October 7th. So about an hour before the Hamas attack on the Nova Music Festival on the morning of October 7th, the IDF commander in charge arrived at the scene after receiving prior intelligence warnings, but he took no preemptive action, Haaretz has learned. Lieutenant Colonel Haim Cohen, commander of the Northern Brigade in the Gaza Division, observed the massive crowds at the festival and noted that only a handful of police officers were on security duty. But Cohen told military investigators he had no information suggesting that he should act differently or order the festival to be dispersed. It has not yet been clarified exactly what intelligence information was disclosed to him that night, but something was disclosed to him about Hamas activity. The Nova party, where 378 people were killed and 44 were taken hostage into Gaza, became the deadliest site of the October 7th attacks. An IDF investigation obtained by Haaretz determined that it was a mistake not to consider canceling or dispersing the festival during the divisional assessment held that night. A deeper discussion might have led to such a decision, despite the division's limited understandings of Hamas's intentions and intelligence constraints. The investigation also said that Cohen miscalculated when he did not assign a military force to the festival complex, given the size of the crowd, the timing, and the sensitive location. And he also was the one that approved the Nova Festival to take place. And what else here? So he remained in his home in Tiberias, northern Israel, overnight into Saturday, October 7th. Throughout the night, the Shin Bet, military intelligence, and senior IDF command picked up alarming signs of unusual Hamas activity. Although not all the information was passed up the chain of command to Cohen, he decided at 3:13 a.m., for unclear reasons, to drive from Tiberias to the division's distant southern base. So he certainly had some intelligence, some indication that something was coming. He went to observe and he said, there's not much security here. And then he left and did not boost the security. All right, so the next one here, Trump suggests backing European troops in Ukraine. So President Trump suggested in an interview with the Daily Caller published on Tuesday that he would be willing to back a European troop deployment in Ukraine as part of a security guarantee for a potential future peace deal, an arrangement Russia has made clear it would never accept. So maybe I've been kind of covering this angle too much. I just think it's important to stress that this constant claim from the Europeans, and we're seeing Trump supporting it, that they're going to send troops to Ukraine, it's just not realistic, and it could just completely end the push toward negotiations. So he said that he would not send U.S. troops, but he was asked if he would use planes as some sort of security guarantee. And he said, quote, "Maybe we'll do something. Look, I'd like to see something get solved. They're not our soldiers, but there are 5,000 to 7,000 mostly young people being killed every single week. If I could stop that and have a plane flying around the air every once in a while, it's going to be mostly the Europeans. But we'd help them. They sort of need it, and we'd help them if we could get something done," end quote. And he was also asked about how his support for the potential security guarantees squares with an America First foreign policy. And essentially he pointed to the fact that NATO countries are now purchasing U.S. weapons directly for Ukraine, although, as I covered recently, this new deal to arm Ukraine with these long-range cruise missiles is partially funded by U.S. military aid. Trump said, quote, "Look, we were spending hundreds of billions of dollars in that war. Now we sell equipment to NATO. I got them to go from 2 to 5. Nobody thought that was and pay." I don't know exactly what he's saying there. This is the direct transcript. "We sell equipment to NATO. We don't sell it to Ukraine. We sell it to NATO. They pay for the equipment. We're not spending any money on the war," end quote. But the U.S. is still supporting it. Intelligence with intelligence, and they're continuing to ship weapon shipments that President Biden approved and all that. So just not looking good for the prospect of peace in Ukraine. All right, the next one here, the growing Republican split over Netanyahu. This one is from The Telegraph, which is interesting, the UK news outlet. And it's about the as the title says, the growing Republican split over Netanyahu. And they start with a good quote from Kurt Mills, who's the executive director of the American Conservative. He's a friend of ours, and I recently did a panel with him on Matt Gaetz' show, which was interesting. But there's this what is it called? This NatCon 5, this American, this conservative conference that's taking place right now. On Tuesday, I actually believe Kurt debated I think his name is Max Abrams, about Israel. So I'm curious to see how that went. But essentially, this is saying that there is a growing split among Republicans, the MAGA people, about how to handle Israel and everything. So this is what Mills said, quote, "If MAGA and the America First movement, or whatever you want to call it, really wants to be ideologically coherent, then it can't be America First with an exception asterisk for Israel," end quote. And this kind of gets into more of the split there and some of the people who are coming out against it. Recently, we've seen Steve Bannon, who has always been pretty supportive of Israel. He's been coming out against certain things and critical of Netanyahu, saying Netanyahu said something like, "If you don't support Israel, you're not MAGA," or something like that. That got him worked up. But they also mentioned Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and kind of this change that we're seeing happen on the American right. All right, so the next one here, Amnesty says Syrian troops executed Druze in Suwayda. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So Amnesty International has released a new report related to the massacres in Syria's Suwayda governorate, confirming that the government and their allies summarily executed dozens of Druze civilians in the course of the crackdown. The report cited verified videos and eyewitness testimonies related to the violence on July 15th and July 16th. This is just 2 days, and concluded that 46 Druze men and women were deliberately and unlawfully killed, again, by government forces. This is just a fraction of the overall death toll in the crackdown of the Druze. Well over 1,400 people were killed, and that includes several hundred, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, 700 who were summarily executed by what they say are Defense Ministry and Interior Ministry personnel. So the Syrian government that the Trump administration is so supportive of, that was also involved in the massacres of the Alawites. And it's no surprise, considering who's leading them, Ahmed al-Shara, or Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who was the founder of al-Qaeda in Syria. And the reports say that he's going to be going to New York for the UN General Assembly. And the U.S. is going to block the Palestinian Authority officials from going. Just really goes to show how insane U.S. foreign policy is. But really, I mean, this is something we were aware of. It was pretty clear what was happening in Suwayda at the time, but more confirmation that, yes, it was Syrian government forces who were executing these people, including an American citizen who was killed on camera, and it was filmed by the executioners. They have no shame about it. Yet Tom Barrack, the U.S. envoy, was denying that the Syrian government fighters were involved in this and everything, providing cover for this government. All right, so the next one, the last one here, Trump to order intervention in Chicago and Baltimore. So this article is from AP News. So President Donald Trump said Tuesday that he's ready to order federal authorities to mobilize and combat crime in Chicago and Baltimore, despite staunch opposition from the elected leaders and many residents in both cities. Asked by reporters in the Oval Office about sending National Guard troops to the nation's third largest city, Trump said, "We're going in," but he added that he did not say when. So we don't know exactly. The governor, the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, is against the idea and everything. And there's local officials in Baltimore who are saying that they're opposed to it as well. He's already sent in National Guard troops to Los Angeles and Washington, where he's also federalized the police force in Washington, D.C. And as I said, when he first did, both of them, it seems like this is about setting a precedent to give him the ability to mobilize federal troops, wherever he wants across the country. And I also, talk about precedent, that airstrike against the boat or missile strike, not sure exactly how it was conducted. That's a big precedent too. We might start seeing a lot more missiles flying around in our hemisphere here. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Jeffrey Sachs and Sybil Fars, How to Stop Israel from Starving Gaza. One from Ron Paul, Department of War. One from Harrison Berger, How U.S. Support for Ukraine's Neo-Nazis Imperils Diplomacy. One from Thomas Knapp, The Gaza War is not over, but Israel has already lost. Spotlight from Wes J. Bryant, Cartels are bad, but they're not terrorists. This is mission creep. So please go check all that out. Go check out our blog, lower parts of the page as well. Lots of content at antiwar.com. Again, please help us with our fundraiser if you can. That is antiwar.com/donate. If you're unable to help us monetarily, we appreciate everyone who comments and shares this show, shares our articles. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. We never put we're never going to put our content behind a paywall. We want to get it out there to as many people as we can. That's our goal. But anyway, that is it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.